That is absolutely correct. A postmodern does not care what you know until he knows that you care. That's very important. Now, inside, postmoderns suspect that something's wrong. A lot of them do. They don't like being in this pressure cooker, and consensus is a pressure cooker. It's like the days of the Spanish Inquisition where everybody has to toe the line. But they don't know how to get out of it. And that's where you and I come in is number one, we show that I care about them because this is going to chew them up too. Remember, cancel culture cancels everybody, including their own. It always has, and especially in the Marxist world. It chewed up its own true believers. And when you, first of all, you can start talking to them, they trust you. Then you can begin questioning them about their worldviews. Well, did you think of it this way or that way? And you can actually see the lights going on in their eyes. You can see it. But they have been indoctrinated. All of our schools, all of the English speaking world, the public education has bought into this. It is destructive. It's like an autoimmune disease. In the West, we are chewing out our own guts for this. We're just chewing ourselves up in this whole thing. Meanwhile, our adversaries, the Chinese, they're looking at Taiwan. They're amping up their whole military. They're putting ships into the South China Sea at an alarming rate. Russia is the Russia's pulled back now. Well, I take it there. They pulled the troops back, but they didn't pull the equipment back from the borders of Ukraine. They perceive I called it virtual President Harris administration here, because most of us are pretty aware that Mr. Biden is encumbered mentally right now, either through dementia or Alzheimer's or something. This is all obvious, but our media are covering that up. They're covering it up. They are waiting for their moment to strike. Israel and Saudi Arabia, they are looking at Iran. Iran has announced that it's going to 60% concentration in its centrifuges. They're well on the way. That JCPOA that President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry worked out was nonsense. It was garbage. It just didn't do anything. And Israel and Saudi Arabia, as strange allies, are determined that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. So the whole geopolitical situation is changing. All of our central banks are pumping massive amounts of money into our economies. They're going to have to keep global inflation under check. It's threatening to just burst out and watch the prices of everything everywhere go skyrocketing again. Those are the realities. And the tension, think of it as I had a rubber band here before. Think of it as a tension between a rubber band between the politically correct narrative and reality is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And you know that sooner or later it's going to go. And when it does, the longer it takes to relieve that strain like an earthquake, the more damaging the blowout that happens after that. That's what we're facing in the world today. You'd never know that. I don't know what it's like in Australia, Joshua. You would never know it from our media in the United States. They're worried about, is there systemic racism here? And that's a creation largely of white elites, not of blacks in academia. That they've created this. They're worried about whether people are offended or this racial group did this or that, or whether we need safe spaces, or whether we should have urinals on aircraft carriers, et cetera, et cetera. Our adversaries are not thinking in those terms, We're in trouble as the West. The West is in trouble. And we're either going to snap out of it and continue improving ourselves, or we're not going to like where we wind up. The Alinsky method, which is one corner of what I call Marxist dialecticalism. The Marxist dialectic, the way Marxists pull down governments, and they're good at it. They're very good. They have it refined now, is they create a dichotomy. So there'll be a crisis, real, imagined, or contrived. COVID, for example, real, imagined, or contrived. Does it make any difference? Nah, not really. They will start and get two groups fighting against each other. So they'll have X over here and Y over there, and they have X fighting Y back and forth, thinking that the other side's the problem, when in reality they're moving you to Z. And they know that. And so the whole Alinsky method, Saul Alinsky himself said, it's friction that makes the whole thing work. And the friction, you have to keep people in a state of constant division, anger, and chaos in order to make that work. You can't. Martin Luther King's goal over here during our civil rights movement in the late 50s and up until the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was peaceful resistance, nonviolent resistance. He understood the idea, the biblical idea, love those who despitefully persecute you and use you. Pray for them, pray and do not curse them, okay? Because they themselves will be victims of their own worldviews. I don't see you, and I know Dean Gocher, who's done a lot of work on diaprax and how the change agentry works. Change agentry is just a formalized process that governments use to put through various projects. It's the same thing. It's divide, conquer, move people along, letting them think they're getting there on their own mental power, but they're not. They're being manipulated to a predetermined conclusion.